Hey guys, my name's Albert and welcome to our Lead the Charge video series. Join me as I chat to industry experts from the EV sector as we cover topics such as leasing, charging, EV accreditations and much, much more. Now sit back, relax, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have learned at least one thing you can take away. Well, hey Jordan, thank you so much for joining us on our Lead the Charge video series. If we could just start by, just a brief introduction to yourself and how you came to be known as the EV guy.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, the EV guy kind of was born out of nothing. My journey started going back 10 years. Everyone does, or a lot of people do the same journey. They go into motor trade, they go into car sales, and then onto a later life into something different. And mine started at Pendragon. So I was on commercial vehicle sales for a long time and moved into fleet, moved into EV fleets, and then over to a company called Elmtronics for 12 months, which led me into Shell, Uber, on-street charging, all that sort of stuff. And the EV guy came about by accident. It was a newsletter originally, just to try and educate people, get my experience out there, gain some experience for myself in writing, etc. And it kind of evolved from there. My LinkedIn started to grow quite rapidly with the content that I was putting out. And I kind of saw a gap in the market. I thought, you know what, this could be a real thing. This could be the EV guy, a central hub, education, information, somewhere for people to go to ask questions, which obviously then led on to lead generation and marketing and all sorts. And it's opened up so many doors. So yeah, the EV guy went live officially about 4 months ago, using my platforms to educate and inform and share content and do lead generation. So yeah, very exciting times.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely grown. Just looking at your LinkedIn and like all the stuff
It
you've got on
has.
TikTok,
It has.
it's just blown up, and it's definitely an area where people need the education. And what's that motivation really behind that? Like the reason for educating and the need for
Yeah, so my background was education. So I went to university and I did sports studies. I worked a lot in schools for about 5 or 6 years, across all age groups. So my background originally was education. And I think it's a kind of a clash of two worlds, the car world, having children, sustainability, and then my background in education as well. And it kind of just came to the forefront during COVID, when everyone had that moment where it was like, well, what do I want to do next? Where do I see myself going? I think that COVID and lockdown was very eye opening for a lot of people, and I just wanted to change. And I say it all the time to my friends. I wrote a list down of industries that I wanted to work in, and top of that list was electric cars, electric vehicles, EV charging, that sort of stuff. And it kind of snowballed itself naturally.
yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what happened, and that's how it worked out.
I mean, it's definitely an interesting collide of worlds. Being working in schools and then because I guess it is so similar in terms of the education is needed and people need to be taught
Yeah.
in such a way that it is actually like starting from the beginning, right?
Oh, for a lot of people, it still is, and for us that work in the industry, and we're all on LinkedIn, we're all quite active, we all talk to each other. It can feel like we're all shouting into the same room a lot of the time, and stepping away from that and reaching the big bad world out there is difficult. So it does feel like you have to start from the very start. There are a lot of people that still don't understand electric vehicles, and it's frustrating for us when we understand them, when we get it, when we're passionate about it, to see people talking negatively about them. But a lot of the time it's just education. It's their understanding of a new technology, and it's moving away from what they've always known and feeling comfortable with something new. And that it almost does feel like you have to start at the very beginning with the education, which it is the bit that I enjoy. And obviously I think we'll come on to myth busting a little bit later, but it does feel like a lot of education is needed and myth busting is needed. And not just for a short piece of time. It has to be
Yeah,
ongoing, it has to be continuous.
yeah. I think because there's so many like um, old ideas that are just burnt into people's minds.
Yeah,
Um,
I think when people see something enough, it does get burnt onto their minds, and we still see the stuff that we had 2, 3 years ago around electric car fires and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And despite all the education being out there, and people like myself and yourself and all the people that we know together, educated people, it's difficult for them to move away from that, and it will take time.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right, exactly that. So, I mean, in terms of what you're doing on a day to day, so you've stepped away from some of the roles you were doing before, and your primary focus is the EV guy and what you're doing with that. So, as a like consultant, educator, content creator, like what does your day-to-day role actually look like? What does it mean?
Yeah, so everything at the moment revolves around the content. So I spend the weekends a lot of the time planning my content for the following week, looking at the news, looking at what's relevant right now, looking at how I can link that into either the partners that I'm working with for marketing or the partners that I'm working with for lead generation. And it does revolve around the content. I use the content for inbound leads, for people that need help, people that come to me and ask questions, and that can very quickly become a lead. One of the things that is great about what I do, being a central hub, one lead can very quickly become three or four. When you're working with salary sacrifice cars, you're working with home charging and car park charging, and I can work with my partners on one lead becoming three or four. It's really beneficial. And I think just having a place for the average Joe or the average Jane to go and say, look, my boss has asked me to look into salary sacrifice cars. Can you help? And before you know it, they've got 1,000 employees that are all interested in
Yeah,
getting a new car, and it's something so small like an inbox on TikTok can come something quite big. So yeah,
yeah,
day to day, it revolves around the content. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. People that know me will know I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I interact a lot on people's posts. I'm always answering DMs. So at the moment, it is that. I think long term, bring on some more partners, help people that are startups, for example, build their following on LinkedIn, get their logo out there. And I'm working with a couple of companies right now. One of them's called And Charge, fantastic company, an app-based product where EV drivers or non-EV drivers even can go onto the app and report issues at charge points, which is a fantastic tool to have. And it means that charge point operators get live information and they
that's
can
great.
go and fix them charges themselves a lot more quicker than they would be able to normally. So yeah, working with partners, marketing, and the content.
So you seem to be working really in all areas, not just with the cars, but charging. Like you're doing a
Yeah,
whole heap of
yeah.
things,
I
really.
think I've taken a lot of advice on this, and when you go self-employed, you do kind of dive in and you try and do everything, and you try and take every lead, and you try and help everybody. And I'm getting better at narrowing that down. I am focusing very much at the moment around salary sacrifice cars, home charging, and the car park charging because they seem to be the areas where people need the most help. Even if it's just somebody that is tentatively thinking about getting an EV. They're not quite sure. Their workplace might offer a scheme and they're thinking about getting one. And it could just be as simple as offering them some advice. My advice is always free. If anyone wants to send me a DM and ask questions and not be judged for their knowledge level, then I'm all for it. Obviously that can snowball into, oh well, I need a home charger. So they might get their car through work and but yeah, I can support them with a home charger.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, never say no to an inbox or helping somebody.
that's great. So in terms of like looking forward and forward thinking, I mean, what's kind of your key goals and initiatives for the next 12 months, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think I still need to establish the EV guy brand. I think a lot of people on LinkedIn still see me as the myth buster, someone who can be quite outspoken, and it's reining that in a little bit, trying to be a little bit more professional at times, trying to make sure that the EV guy brand becomes a central hub for people that want help. Companies can trust in the brand. Well, yeah, he's helped this company. I know he's done a great job. Maybe he can help us as well. So I think establishing the brand is a big thing for me. Coming out of shell world, as I call it, can be quite tough. You can be tainted with that grey cloud. You've worked for an oil company and all that sort of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think the EV guy, it's a good fun company. I'm helping a lot of people, but I think it needs to be established a little bit over the next 6 to 12 months, which is kind of where I'm aiming for.
I mean, it's exciting because you're in such early stages, and just seeing what you've done already.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
impact. Because as you said, you're very, very active on LinkedIn, your TikToks, and TikToks. What a platform! I mean, TikTok is such a great platform to explode and have people actually go in. It's actually,
yeah,
I think, it overtook Google. Not that this is about TikTok, but it overtook Google for the number one search engine in the world, which is
yeah,
crazy. So, such
yeah.
a great place for education and for that.
It is, and this is what I mean about we all kind of shout into the same room. There's not many people doing what I do on TikTok. In fact, there's not many people doing what I do. Full stop. Obviously, we have the EV consultants working with businesses, but we don't really have people working with the general public. My TikTok channel allows that. It allows me to keep the education going, keep the content and the information being put out there. And yes, there's a lot of negativity. You have to have very thick skin, especially when you're on social media as much as I am. But I do see some positivity out of that. You can reach the general public quite easily with that. And like I said earlier, my DMs on TikTok are quite active for people that are looking for help. So yeah, it's just another way of reaching people away from LinkedIn,
Yeah,
reaching the general public, reaching people that have seen that misinformation, have seen that
yeah.
scaremongering stuff, and they want to ask the question. They want to know. They want to find out. So yeah, it does help in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. And one of the things I see you doing is when people have made a comment and you actually address that comment, and a lot of the time it's just outdated or complete misinformation.
Yeah, there's two ways I do that. Obviously, I can take a positive comment, put it in the video itself, repeat the comment, and people can gain trust from that. Or I can take a negative comment or a question and I can discuss it on the video, which then gives me an opportunity. I call it free content. These people give me free content. They ask a question, they say something negative, and I use that to then educate again. So I'm kind of turning it back around and using what they've commented to educate people as well.
So yeah, I mean, it's such a great idea. It's like such a great idea when it comes to education. That's where people go and watching a lot of videos. So then from that, so from what you've been, the last 4 months and longer, from your perspective, if we was to look at the market right now and from what you're doing, what would you say the top 5 EVs in the market at the moment, and what makes those EVs stand
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, there'll be people watching this that call me Tesla fanboy, and I am. I've
Me
always had a
too.
Tesla.
Me
I'm
too.
on my. I think a lot of people are. A lot of people love the cars. They love the technology. It just suits my family perfectly. The kids love it. We've got the Netflix on the screen. The infotainment's fantastic. The car drives exactly what I look for in a car. So yeah, moving away from Tesla is quite difficult. And doing what I do, I've driven the Ford Explorer recently. Absolutely fantastic car. I've got very strong feelings for the likes of Kia and Hyundai, doing some fantastic work. And one of the things that people can do is just go and check out the websites that do car reviews. Your likes of CarWow and Top Gear and Auto Trader, and you can see the same names on the lists constantly. And Kia and Hyundai score very highly on all of them. Always in the top 10. In terms of range, the cars are fantastic. And then price bracket as well, they're kind of towards the lower to middle end. People always see Porsche Taycans and the expensive Mercedes, and they think that they should be the top five. But for me, it's the cars that people can look at getting into
Yeah,
realistically.
for sure.
Um, I do have a big soft spot for the Cupra Born. I just absolutely love it. I've only driven it once, but it just seems like it's like one of the cars of the future, like the car that you can see as like the new Fiesta, for example, where 20, 21-year-old lads in 2, 3, 4 years' time will be going into electric car. And I think Cooper Born will be one of the options that they'll be taking for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right there. It's a lovely car, fun car to drive. Yeah, it's funny when we look at the EV brands, and some of those brands that you said. If you just go back 10 years ago and say that these would be cars that are in the top running for, or just cars in general,
Yeah.
some of those brands just wouldn't be there or didn't exist. Well, Tesla, one of them, didn't. No one really knew
Yeah.
what Tesla was. Didn't exist in a lot of places. But then some of these other brands that you wouldn't necessarily think twice about getting it if it was a petrol car. But some of those ones are actually starting to become the better EVs. I mean, a
Yeah.
big example, MG4, right? I mean, MG4,
Absolutely.
would you ever buy an MG petrol or diesel car? I mean, I think a lot of people wouldn't. Don't get me wrong, people did, but a lot of people wouldn't. But actually, it's such a great EV, great price point for people as well. Yeah, there's a few brands like that.
There is. I think MG, obviously they have the history and people see them as sometimes a little bit unreliable. They've got their own customer base that loves them, but they've evolved into like an EV company really well. And this is why I mention all the time, like Kia and Hyundai, they're not always people's first choice for a petrol or diesel car. But when they're starting to think about EV, these are the names that come up constantly. Like the MG ZS EV and the MG4. Like my brother works for Trolley Group and he says their customers absolutely love them. Obviously they've got the acceleration, they've got the fun factor, but they've also got the range and they're lasting as well, which is good to see.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just funny, isn't it, how it's changed and adapted. And like I have the conversation. I think I've mentioned this a few times with a few different people, but I had the conversation with people about the BMW X3 and then the iX3. Just like people wanted to stay in that BMW, but actually the car is completely different. They don't
Yeah,
work the same. They don't function the same. And that's where a lot
yeah,
of people might go wrong. They see the badge and they see the car and they just see it as another fuel type. Whereas where it is another fuel type, there's so much more to it. If you just do the change
Absolutely.
without actually looking into it, and that's where people become frustrated, right?
Yeah, I think for sure, and obviously people they become loyal to a brand. The likes of Ford, people would buy a Ford and then get another Ford and then another Ford, and then they'd have them their entire life. But I think we're seeing people looking elsewhere. We're seeing people look at the likes of Kia and Hyundai and MG and think, you know what, they're doing some really good stuff. I'm seeing reviews on them constantly. I'm hearing people saying positive things about them. And I think for the first time in a long time, we're starting to see loyal customer bases potentially have their head turned towards other brands.
Yeah,
And it's the ones that have adapted really well that will start to see their customer bases grow over the next 5 years.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And then, yeah, just another question on the back of that, Jordan, really was the Chinese brands. I feel like it's quite a hot topic. Some people really annoyed about the Chinese brands coming in. I feel
Yeah.
it's quite a strange thing to be annoyed about, but people be annoyed about them or don't trust them. And actually, I mean, I have my opinions on them, but Chinese brands. Let's talk like BYD and XPeng
Yes.
and stuff like that.
One one of my favorite things to talk about. Now, obviously, historically, we've been taught to dislike China, dislike what comes out of China. We consider it cheap, which isn't the case when it comes to the likes of BYD. And I shared a video on TikTok of a bloke talking about the Xiaomi SU7, I think it's called. It's like the sports car, hypercar of the EV world, and it's like £20,000. It's just insane. But I've got quite strong ties with BYD in Sheffield. I'm down there quite a lot, looking at the cars, doing videos, speaking to the sales guys. One of the things that shocked me about 2 months ago about BYD was the fact that they've got a 24-hour turnaround when it comes to parts. So if you have a minor bump in your car in a BYD, you can have that fixed within 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours, which kind of alleviates the whole, oh, EV cars get written off with minor bumps, you can't get parts for them. Well, in actual fact, BYD are doing this already. A 24-hour turnaround for a part for a car is astonishing for a new technology for a company that's based in China. It's astonishing, and the cars themselves, the quality is so high that you wouldn't expect it. One of the things that I say, and I know a lot of people say this, is go and test drive. Go and test drive a car and see for yourself, because people won't believe me. People won't believe you. They just think that we work in the EV industry, so we would say that. And I get it a lot being the EV guy, but these Chinese brands are doing what the European brands should have done 5 years ago. They should have adapted. They should have started earlier. They should have looked into bringing production costs down, very similar to what Tesla have done over the last 5 years. But the Chinese just seem to be head and shoulders above when it comes to production costs and keeping costs down for the end customer.
Yeah, and ultimately, it's good for everyone, right? People are moaning about
Well,
the high price of EVs, and actually, you can now get into a very good EV for an affordable price.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think even with the EU tariff that's been imposed on them, I think they're still a lot cheaper than most of the European cars on the market. Without that tariff, I think BYD and their competitors would probably be selling a lot more cars than they already are. When I was at BYD Sheffield a couple of months ago, they're telling me that fleets are moving away from the likes of Mercedes and Ford, and they're taking BYDs in quite large numbers because of the price, because of the quality of the car, because of the range that they can offer. And the sales reps or the account managers or whoever it might be that's going into these cars are loving them.
yeah, I mean, even their battery technology. You got to look at the Blade batteries from BYD, and you know,
Yeah,
just incredible for the
yeah,
price point that they're at. I mean, as you said, some of the bigger brands should have been doing it a long time ago. And I'm a big fan of the Chinese brands. And when you drive them, as you said, you'll notice they are great quality. We've got some
they
people in
are.
our workplace who are moving to BYD, getting BYDs and loving the cars.
Yeah, I think just going to sit in one, you can within 5 seconds of sitting in a BYD, you will see how high quality they are. The seats, the dash, the screen, the technology, everything is almost like a high-end European manufacturer, but in a Chinese car with a Chinese price tag.
Yeah, which is what people need, I think.
It is, and like you see it. We've been told for the last 2 3 years that EVs are too expensive, and then a cheaper EV comes along, and we're then told that, oh, the quality must not be so great. And it's like you can't have it both ways. You buy a lower end priced car, you expect a lower end quality. It's the same with traditional cars. You spend £15,000 on a Ford Fiesta 5 years ago, it would have not have matched the quality of a Ford Mondeo titanium. It's the same thing.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, people seem to think it's a whole different world when it comes to the EV car and buying the car, that for some reason it should work differently, but just because it's got a battery in it. But
Yeah.
you know, on that, I mean, I guess that's kind of like a starting point for the myths, really, because I'd say that is a myth that the Chinese brands coming through, they're bad quality, they're not great cars, they're going to die on you, all that kind of stuff. I mean, if we look at the myths in the EV world and the misconceptions, what would you say are some of the big ones, and how would you address them?
I think we're trying to move away from the ridiculous ones. The main one being the EV fires. I think we've kind of, as an industry, we've tackled that quite well.
Yeah,
I think the
yeah,
education that's been put out there, I'm seeing less and less people tell me that EV cars catch fire spontaneously. And you still do get the negative comments, and you still do get people sending links, and you click on the link and it's like a 6-year-old article. And that we've come so far since then. And when you look at the actual data, the cars themselves catch fire significantly less. I believe 20 to 40 times less. And when you try and provide people with that information, they very quickly come back with, oh, yeah, but you can't put them out. Or fire brigades struggle to put them out. It's like, well, no, because the safety technology is also advancing at the same time, which means that it's not always the battery that catches fire anyway. And fire brigades have got better equipment, they've got
yeah,
better technology. And in 5 years' time, it will be even further advanced. So that's the one that I kind of try and stay away from, because we've tackled it, I think, as an industry quite well. But the more common ones are around range and charging and cost and all that sort of stuff. And again, when you look at the data, most people, particularly in the UK, do less than 20 miles a day. I think the average commute is 17 or 18 miles a day, which means when you have even just a standard electric car, you would only have to charge that car once a week. Similar to what you would do with a fuel station, you would go once a week, you would do your fuel up once a week. And yeah, it's educating people around that, especially those that can have a home charger, which is obviously, that's what I call the game changing part of having an electric car. If you can charge from home, a lot of the time it can actually pay for itself. It allowed me to go into a Tesla Model 3 originally. It allowed me to go into my new Tesla Model Y because I don't have a fuel bill. It's about £16 a month that I pay. So I'm saving between 100 and £150 a month just on fuel, which has meant that I can then go for a higher end car. I'm still spending similar amounts of money a month on motoring, but I'm driving the car that I want to drive.
yeah. Huge difference, isn't it? I mean, and that's something I used to say to people working at Tesla all the time is people were so focused on the monthly payment, they weren't focusing on the overall payments. It's like, well,
Yeah, absolutely. It's total life costs, isn't it? And this
yeah,
is another thing that we are starting to educate people on a little bit. When you
yeah,
factor in the cost of the car, a lot of people finance cars, they lease them, they PCP them, and you see the Tesla price on the monthly being a little bit more compared to like a 3 Series or something. And people are kind of scared away from it. And it's
yeah,
like, well, no, just consider your fuel,
yeah.
consider the maintenance, consider all that stuff, and you can actually quickly realize that the total cost of that car monthly can be very similar to what you're paying for now, or even less.
Less, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was in a brand new Q3 and I was paying $320 a month. Fuel was about £300 a month and £80 a month on congestion charge. Like
Yeah,
crazy. I was spending like £700 a month. Got into a
yeah,
Tesla for $499 a month, and that's pretty much my overall cost. So although my monthly was seemingly a lot more, my overall cost was so much cheaper, and I was able to
yeah.
actually look at it and break it down and say, well, actually, I'm saving money.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, because people you don't pay for your fuel monthly, you don't pay for it up front like you do with the car. People kind of forget to factor it in, and they don't realize if you're going to put in £30 and then £40 and then another £30, and over the course of a month, when you've done that once or twice a week, that can become £200, £300 fuel bill. And because it's like an ongoing thing that you're doing weekly, you don't kind of factor that into your monthly cost of the car. But yeah, motoring needs to be bundled into one package, everything included.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I agree completely. And as you said, with the home charging, it's a big game changer. Being able to charge at home, and then some people do say, like, well, I can't charge at home, but there are lots of I can't charge at home either. There are lots of other options.
Yep.
Workplace charging is becoming a thing for lots and lots of companies. It's becoming an
Yep.
incentive for companies to have chargers as well. And there are other ways of charging that aren't just fast charging all the time. And luckily, as a Tesla owner, the fast charging is actually not too bad.
Yeah.
If I'm
Well, the
just
supercharger network, if you get it at the right time, I think the last
yeah
time I used a supercharger, it was about 43 pence a kilowatt hour, which is still less than what petrol or diesel would
yeah.
cost me per
I
mile.
think I charged yesterday for 39p, 39p. But
Wow.
there's a place, Scotch Corner, where actually, if you go after certain times, 22p per kilowatt.
Wow.
That's up near Newcastle way, but not that I'm up there much. But it's interesting because there are things like the charging prices aren't regulated and stuff like that. There are some gripes, right? But there are
Absolutely.
so many myths that
Yeah. And I think this is where we have to be honest as an industry. And it's something that I've kind of learned to do over the last few months, be a little bit more honest about some of the pain points that are out there, not just talking about the positives all the time and trying to pull the wool over people's eyes and tell everyone how great it is all the time. Because public charging, as we all know, can be very expensive. When you look at the Shell Recharge network, the BP network, and you're up at like 79, 85 pence a kilowatt hour, you're 50, 75% more expensive than petrol and diesel. And this is what people see. People see, oh, I can't charge at home. I'd have to go and use that charger. Why should I pay more for fuel? I say fuel. But there are other ways of doing it. And I think the more experienced you come as an EV
yeah
driver, the more you realize that there are other ways. Workplace, as you mentioned, I think will become a big thing if it not already is. If a company is asking you to drive an electric car to help them with their scope 3 emissions, for example, then should they be providing charging at work? And for me, yes, they should. Everyone's got a car park, everyone's got somewhere where staff park when they come into work. Put some slow chargers on there, put some 3.5, 7 kilowatt chargers on there, and let them charge their car whilst they're sat in the office at work. Destination charging is another one. If you go somewhere at the weekend and you're driving 200, 300 miles, should you be able to charge your car whilst you're there? Absolutely. But for me, the big one is on-street charging. Now, my background with Uber obviously was in on-street charging, and we still haven't seen the rollouts that we've been promised for the last 2 years. There's a lot of red tape around it. Obviously, with the funding and things like that being delayed and councils not having their strategies in place, which has changed this year. It has developed quite well this year, but I think we're still behind where we should be when it comes to on-street charging and having first-hand experience with how slow that process can be. Yeah, I think it needs to be done a lot quicker, and I think we will see some more
yeah.
developments in on-street charging next year, the start of next year. But who knows? We might see some more delays there as well. But that is another one that will help people. And when it comes to on-street charging as well, it's no good having the charger on streets near people's homes. They also have to be priced fairly as well to encourage that EV uptake.
I think it's funny when it comes to EV slow, like the AC charging, because there was this massive push around. I can't get here. I can't charge quick enough. So now the DC charging has grown, and there's lots of DC chargers. More are going in, and now it almost seems kind of backwards. Now there's this kind of, well, what about the DC AC charging? There's just as much as need for the AC charging. It serves a purpose. It has a place.
Yeah,
There's
I
nothing
think
worse.
if anything,
Sorry, go
there's
on.
more of a need for the AC charging. We've
Yeah,
kind of
I
as
agree.
a humanity, as a people, we are impatient. We like to charge things quickly. We like things done quickly. And I think 2 years ago, everything was like, well, if you're going to have an EV, you need to charge it fast. And it's like, well, step back and actually realize how long your car is parked for during the day or overnight. And when you say that to people, they kind of have that light bulb moment where they realize that I don't need to be charging my car in half an hour. I can be charging it in 8 hours because the car is just sat there. And we've gone down the route of having rapid chargers installed everywhere, which is fantastic. It is needed. It's a big part of the mix. But now we're having to try and wind that back in a little bit and look at the AC, look at workplace, look
Yeah,
at on street, and look at destination charging where people go somewhere for 4 or 5 hours. I've had it in the past where it was a motorway services, and by the time I'd been in the services, grabbed some food and come outside, I was already getting overstay fees because the car had charged that fast, and I had to go and move the car before I was even finished.
yeah.
And it was, yeah, that could have been a slower charger. I could have spent an hour in the services, having a relax, getting some food with the family, and then come out. But yeah, we have. evolved down that route of DC charging as a must. You have to charge your car quickly, and
Yeah.
just hold on a minute. Let's just charge the car whilst it's stopped,
Yeah.
or charge whilst parked, and all that sort of stuff. And it does all come back to that education all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. 100. I mean, there's a shopping center I go to, and I would never use the Tesla superchargers there because I'm going to have to come out and move the car, right? Now they've got loads of pod points. It's 20 miles for me to get there, and it's charging at 30, I think 31 miles an hour. I think I get out the slow charger. So if I'm there an hour, I've already got more than it took me to get there, and I'm probably there
Yeah,
for a few hours at a time. It's like the fast charging, yeah, as we just said, I feel like the AC serves a purpose, and sometimes charging DC just isn't. When you're driving long distance and you need to get somewhere quick, yeah, of course.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And that's it. You don't always have to charge full. And this
yeah,
is another thing that people don't realize. Like if I'm out and about in my car, and a lot of the time I might forget to charge it overnight at home, but I don't need to panic because I know where the chargers are. I know I can get a charge. And if I am on the way home from somewhere, I would never sit at a rapid charger and charge it full. I would just take what I need because I know that I can get home, plug it in at home, charge it overnight, and lo and behold, I'm back up to full again.
yeah, and it's cheaper,
Again,
right?
a lot cheaper. So why would you sit at a DC rapid charger paying 50, 60, 70 pence a kilowatt hour when I can just take the 15 miles that I need in the space of about 3 minutes, get home, plug it in at home, and charge it overnight? Which obviously not everybody can do, and we understand that. And it is having a little bit of patience with people that can't charge at home and educating them and saying, look, if you do want to get an EV, there are options out there. And I think one of the things that, going back to the myth busting, is this whole word around being forced. Like, we've still got 6 years before anything happens. We've still got 6 years until 2030. You're not being forced into an EV right now. Take your time, get the education, and when the time is right for you, yes, then consider an electric car. But right now, you're not being forced.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think people feeling a lot more pressure than I think maybe that there actually is. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and in 4, 5, 6 years time, the EVs on the second-hand market are going to be completely different to the ones on the second-hand market.
Yeah,
Right? It's changing
yeah.
so quickly.
Well, the battery technology from new is changing, which means that the trickle down effect into the used market means that in 5 years' time, the batteries in used cars are going to be far superior to what they are now because the technology is advancing so quickly. And this, again, it comes back to the myth busting around used prices have crashed, EV depreciation, all that sort of stuff. Again, just take a step back and realize what is happening. Look how quickly the market is evolving. The cars are adapting so quickly. The battery technology, the charging technology, it hasn't had a steady period to steady out. The ICE market has had 100 years.
Yeah,
The EV market, and I say this all the time, people don't realize that EVs only became fully popular in 2019. We're only 5 years in to a drastic, big transition
yeah,
where
yeah, you're
things
right.
are adapting very quickly. So take a step back, take a breather, just relax, and let things just take its course.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. We went from in a very short space of time, probably selling 1 or 2 cars a week to selling 60 cars a week.
Yeah,
And it changed like that. So it's really interesting to be in the role that I'm in now, where I'm working in the used industry, and saying that people more than likely come in the used. The uptake will come very, very quickly, and we're already seeing more and more used EVs come in, and used EVs coming more and more popular. So just
yeah.
on that, a question. Um, I suppose you do this on a day-to-day basis, but what would be like your advice to somebody who is completely not understanding of EVs? They've never had an EV, but they're thinking about getting into an EV for the first time. What would be
Yeah.
your advice for that person?
I think there's two factors for me that are the most important. One of them is going to test drive. Now, when people shop for a new car or a used car, I know we've got the internet these days and you can order a car to your doorstep, but it's a significant purchase. Test drive, find out what you like, find out what suits you, what you find comfortable, what you feel is a nice drive. Do the usual stuff that you would always do. But the second thing, always consider where you would charge that car. Is it something that you can charge at home? Have you got on-street chargers near yourself? Can you charge it at work? And I speak to people quite a lot that tell me, "Oh, I haven't got a home charger." And when you kind of start to ask them a few questions and you find out about their lifestyle and how many miles they do, they can charge at work without, they didn't even realize they can charge at work. And then again, that light bulb moment of, oh, I can have an EV. I can have the car that I want. I've been looking at the Cupra Born for the last 12 months. I'd love to get a Cupra Born, and now I can actually get one. So yeah, where you're going to charge it, test drive. Test drive is so important, and I think the people that are anti-EV or think they don't like EVs or say they don't like EVs, a lot of them haven't even sat in one. Never mind driven one, or never mind driven one for an extended period of time. And a lot of the people that I speak to people over the course of 12 months. I might speak to them the first time last year, and I'll speak to them again this year, and they'll say, I actually went to test drive one. I drove a Tesla Model 3 last week. I absolutely loved it. And I
Yeah,
didn't think I would, but I absolutely loved it. And it's that evolving and taking your time and being open-minded about it.
yeah,
When it comes to a used EV, there's a couple of things that people need to be looking out for. Obviously, battery health is a big one. Ask the dealership to show you the report on the battery. And we're seeing at the moment batteries degrade between 1 and 2% per year, which is a loss of the overall range. If you can find a car that sits within that or underneath that, you know that car is being looked after. And it's just one of the things that you have to add on to shopping around for a used EV. You have a look around the car, you look for damage, you look at the tires, you ask for the report of the MOT or whatever it might be. Check the battery health, and if it's been looked after, you know that car will last you as long as it needed to last you.
yeah. That's awesome, man. And then you know, it is super important. As you said, it's a significant purchase. I mean, they say it's the second biggest purchase you'll ever make in your life when you purchase a car. So it's a big thing, and the way you shop for an EV is definitely changing than the way you'd shop for your normal car. But in terms of your role and what you do, I mean, it's definitely very exciting. It's great to see what you're doing and everything that's coming through on your TikTok and on LinkedIn. How do you see like the role of content creation when it comes to education and EV playing an impact and having a role
Yeah,
for
yeah.
new owners?
I think it does feel like I'm quite early to the game of creating content around EVs. We have a lot of people doing like car review videos. One of the people that I look up to, and I think I've told her, is Abigail, who does car reviews and she does
Yeah,
interviews and stuff. She's fantastic. And I think having more people like that that are confident on camera, will talk about the pros and cons of electric cars and educate people, I think it will become a bigger thing. One thing that I would like to see is the manufacturers themselves doing more education, doing more content, rather than just having the traditional adverts on TV. Actually, have some education around the EV. And like you watch TV at night, and you might see an advert for an Audi e-tron, and it shows on the bottom left £75,000, and yeah, the video looks great, the car looks great, but you're not actually educating people on what it is to have an EV, what it is to have this car over the petrol equivalent. So I would like to see the manufacturers step up, doing more content, doing more marketing around education for electric vehicles for sure.
yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I've gone in and looked and spoke to people about EVs before, and I've not told them what I do or that where I've worked, and even the salespeople just really don't fully understand how to sell that EV.
Yeah,
And I actually spoke to someone once, and he was just like trying to steer me away from the EV, trying to get me to go into petrol or diesel equivalent.
yeah.
And I,
This is that's another big thing. Like dealership level is so important. Like most people, I know we have the whole grey cloud around salesmen and are they dodgy, are they genuine, and that sort of stuff. But a salesman is an important person to people when it comes to buying a car. They trust what they say. They're relying on you for information. They're relying on you to kind of guide them, ask them questions, listen to their answers, and guide them towards the right car. Whether that's petrol or EV, doesn't matter. You should be guiding them towards the car that suits them. And ask them, can they charge at home? Can they charge at work? What's your total monthly cost for motoring and all that sort of stuff, and guide them towards the car that would suit them best, because a lot of the time an electric vehicle would suit more people than we realize. A big portion of the population, I believe 60 to 70% of the people in the UK have got access to private parking, which therefore means access to home charging on that smart tariff. So an electric vehicle could suit them, but they're just looking for someone to educate them,
yeah,
looking for someone to guide them, to give them that confidence to make that significant purchase.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, just the final two questions really. Just what would you say is the biggest challenge when it comes to widespread EV adoption?
100% the misinformation. I think obviously we get it from all angles when you work in this industry. We constantly feel like we're on the back foot. We constantly feel like we're being defensive. I think if we can keep educating naturally, don't force it on people, offer the advice, offer the education when the time is right, people will come to the senses or come to the decision themselves. But the misinformation, I think, has and still is having a big impact on uptake. I think people that an EV could suit their lifestyle and the miles that they do and the cars that they like could suit them very well, but they're very hesitant because they've seen Facebook memes is a big one for me. Like people making jokes is one thing, but when you're trying to force your opinion on somebody by creating a meme, and people believe things like that. People see things on Facebook and they believe it, especially when you see it two, three, four, 5 times. So yeah, misinformation for me needs to go away because people should have a choice of what car they want. People should have the ability to make an informed choice is huge for me. Give them the information without the misinformation and let them choose.
Yeah, for sure. It's so funny how passionate the haters actually are. Like it's actually crazy. Like
It
let
is.
people
It
make
is.
their own choice.
It is. And I get this all the time. People say, "Oh, as the EV guy, you're obviously you make money from people getting an electric car." I don't, because I only make money if someone wants to take an electric car. I'm not forcing people into an electric car. I'm not persuading them into an electric car. I'm just giving them the
Yeah,
information for them to make that informed choice.
yeah,
And
great.
yeah, the passion behind the anti-EV people is crazy. Like to the point where on a daily basis, I take abuse, particularly on TikTok. I take abuse about my looks, my size, me being an electric car fanatic, as they call me, being a Tesla fanboy. And the abuse can get quite severe
Yeah,
because they think they don't like electric cars. It's almost like they have to abuse me.
yeah.
It's really
Wild,
strange.
wild.
It's wild. Honestly, it is wild. And this is why I said at the start, you have to have the quite thick skin to
Yeah,
do what I do and to do what yourself and people that are active on social media do. Um, because they are very passionate about persuading other people not to take an electric car
yeah,
because they think they don't like them themselves.
yeah.
It's very, very strange.
It is very strange and yeah, massive, massive what you said about the misinformation as well because it actually annoys me sometimes when you see the same person banging the same drum. Like, when are you going to stop?
Well, I had one guy on my TikTok and I actually ended up making a video about him because I screenshotted 4 or 5 of his comments. And within the space of 5 minutes, he'd commented 4 different things for reasons for other people not to take an EV. And just listen to how ridiculous some of these are. It was, how do I charge my car with a caravan attached? I don't have a caravan, so that's not an issue. The second one was petrol stations have got roofs on them, whereas EV charging stations don't. I'm like, is this guy serious? There was the issue around child slave labor in the cobalt mines, whereas mine's a rear wheel drive. There's no cobalt in my Tesla. And this guy obviously uses fuel on a daily basis, which is refined coincidentally with cobalt. And yeah, it's just so bizarre. Anyway, I made a video about it and he wasn't happy. Like people need the education because if you're driving a petrol or a diesel car, you have been using cobalt since the day you started driving.
Yeah,
You have a smartphone, you have a laptop, you have a computer, all of which require minerals like cobalt. You have a home with things like copper throughout. You have a workplace that might use cobalt. You have cobalt in paint and in alloys and in medical equipment and all this sort of stuff. And like you're using it every single day. Just because I have it in my car, I don't have it in my car. It's in some electric cars. You want to try and attack someone for that? It's really bizarre.
so we'll leave with this last one. I mean, obviously, you're deeply involved with the EV community, and I think your place in the EV community is needed and is appreciated by lots of people. I've shared lots of your stuff. I interact with lots of your stuff. It's some really great content. And what would your message? What would your message be to any listener or anyone? Anyone that might be listening for the future of EVs.
For me, don't be afraid of change. Just let the transition happen. And if you want to take an EV, don't listen to other people. Do your own research, concentrate on yourself. And if it fits your lifestyle, go and test drive. Don't listen to other people on social media. And if you do listen to somebody, listen to someone that knows what they're talking about, someone that's done the research, that's got the experience, that's got the knowledge, rather than a Facebook meme.
Yep. A faceless Facebook meme. Yeah.
Yes,
Very true.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And if anyone's looking for any advice, any questions, you want some help with cars or charging, please feel free to send me a DM. My advice is always free.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jordan. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us. On
No,
our
thank you for having me on. It's very exciting.
it's super important for us to, as we said, to get education out there, speak to industry experts, and as you said, coming from just myself, it's great to have it coming from other people from in the industry. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.